started yet. Good morning, everybody. It's thanks to the organizers for having me here again. It's really a blast to be here in Helsinki, and thank you all for getting up this early in the morning. I know it's, for some of you, it might be hard to stay awake, so I hope you don't need pillows. And I will spend the next hour talking a little bit about physical penetration testing and lockpicking, and hopefully I can open some Abloy locks as well. So, who am I? My name is Belgers. Actually, in my daytime job, I do pen testing stuff, but as a hobby, I am into lockpicking. So I'm currently the president of the Open Organization of Lockpickers. And last year, I was the fastest lockpicker in the lockpicking competition. And I like Finland because of your Swedes. I still need to go back one day to do some rally driving. But I kind of have a love-hate relationship with your keys, because you have these great Abloy keys. And they're everywhere, and they're actually really hard to pick. Even the oldest ones, the classics. So, what am I going to talk about? Actually, the idea was, suppose you need to do physical penetration testing, you need to go into an office building and penetrate into the server room where all the big data is, and want to have access to that. What can you encounter along the way, and how do you defeat those locking mechanisms? Of course, normally your room would look a little bit more like this. And I have a little disclaimer. I will be showing you some tricks. So it's not all about lock picking, but also about lock circumvention. How can you use clever tricks to get around a lock? So please don't use this knowledge for illegal activities, or I will microwave this cat. Right? So for opening a lock, actually you have several different techniques. What we use normally, daily, is I don't have a lock with the, do I have a lock with the key? Yeah. Is with the original key, of course, which is not really fascinating at all. Then you have forced entry. This is what burglars normally use. Breaking the lock or breaking the door or whatever to get entry, which is in most cases the fastest and easiest way to get entry. And then you have covert or surreptitious entry, which means you're opening the lock without force, but without leaving any obvious traces. I could go into detail about how, what traces you actually leave, because you do leave some traces. So if you really have a good forensic investigation, you will still be able to see whether a lock is opened using the key or a screwdriver or lockpicking tools. But to the naked eye, it will look like there's nothing going on there. And this, of course, is the most interesting one. This is what lockpickers do. So, step one. We're at the door, the entrance door. How to get in. And you might think I need to go and open the lock, but if you look at a door, there's many other ways to get in and get around the lock that's inside. So I'm really into lockpicking, but if you are a hacker and you want to get in, lockpicking is probably not the first thing you would think about when doing physical pen testing. So at the door, what you can do, for instance, is use a device like this. This is like a fishing rod, but for the door handle. And you can make them yourself from some 3mm steel and a wire. And this is how you use it. Oh, I don't have sound other than this. Right, so lockpicking might be interesting and fun, but it takes more time than using this device. This you can build yourself, and it's really, it works really well at hotels. Why? Because in a hotel, it's mandatory to be able to open the door from the inside always. So if you take a close look at your door here, if you lock it using the knob, it will still open using the handle. And this is because of, in case of fire, you need to be able to get out quickly. So this tool you can adjust by position. So first you measure how high the thing is, then you position it in the correct position at the outside of the door, and you turn the handle and you're in. So this is actually a rather interesting trick to circumvent the whole locking mechanism. But and also if you have a door you have a latch, but you might have a second one that you can really, with which you can really lock the door. Those ones are normally solid, and this one is slanted, so if you close the door, it will close automatically. For those kind of locks that are not locked using this latch, you can open them from the outside by just manipulating this latch, of course, if you have room to do so. So on the top right you see that from an empty soda bottle you can cut a piece of plastic that has a bit of a round shape that's perfectly to manipulate the latch from the outside. Of course you need to have room in there to insert the tool. And this is the technique that you will see in CSI, where they're using credit cards. It's the same method. If you're a professional locksmith, you can buy specifically made plastic that's really durable to open the lock. And there are some metal thingies that you can use as well. So you need to be able to insert it into the door. Normally, on the top of the door, there's nothing holding the door in the door sill, so you can push a little bit on the door. Push a little bit, then insert the metal and slide it down, and the bolt will retract, and you have entry inside of the building. You can actually protect against this. If you look at the doors that we have here in this hotel, you will see that the knob is not like this, but it's specially constructed so that from either side you cannot really insert such a device. But for regular locks that you will find in homes, this is a possibility. So here's a good tip: never leave your door without actually locking it. Now you might say, I have some additional devices. I don't know how common these kind of devices are here, but right, this is a device so the door can only open this bit. But for every such device there is a clever way of circumventing it. So how do we do this? And this you can buy on the internet. Or you can make a tool yourself. Actually just a playing card will suffice. A bit of carton. Or you have things like these. That's really interesting because this is like real hacking, right? If you encounter this and you start thinking about how to circumvent this, what would you do?
Cut the chain.
Sorry?
Cut the chain.
Cut the chain. Yeah, okay, but there's possibilities of doing this surreptitiously. Well, the problem is you need to push it in that direction while the door is closed enough to allow the chain to reach the end of this thing. So you need to close the door and still have something pull at it in the right direction. So you make a device that pulls on it, like a rubber band, and do it in the right direction. So in this position, I don't have enough room to get to the other side of the slider, but I do have room to insert a rubber band. Now I need to set it up to pull in the correct position. Close the door. And of course you can also do this from the top of the door, for instance. So if you have a large rubber band, move it on the top of the door so you pull in the correct direction. Right, so there are many ways to actually hack a door without using the lock. Obviously this is not the right solution to fix this problem. If you want to fix this, use something like this. Yeah, you can actually buy it, but it's more like an art project than actually. And I was talking with some people here yesterday who told me this is also becoming more popular in Finland. This is, I only know the Dutch word for the technique, but this is used very commonly in the Netherlands to break into houses. So if you lock your door, well, not lock your door, close your door, but not lock it, so it will open using the handle. You can use any hole in the door, such as the letterbox, to insert a metal piece to open the door. There's actually stuff you can buy that will fit into the somewhat larger keyholes to open the door from the inside. And actually also you have, on these doors you have these little spy eyes. You can pop them out from the outside and use that hole to insert a device that will open the door handle from the inside. So again, my tip to you for security would be to always lock your door if you leave your house. Because almost any system, people have thought about it and thought about how can we hack it. So these are the windows that you can open in two directions. We have them here probably as well. And the idea is that you open them, if you open them this way, they will only open a small bit and you won't be able to get in. And you need to close it completely before you can open it in the other direction. But again, if you're in the outside and you're a smart hacker, you can think of tools that will actually get the window from one position to the other. So that's the tool, and here's the guy demonstrating it. So we need to be able to manipulate the handle while the window is closed. So what you do, you just attach some wires to it, and then you just close the window. But the wires are still in place. It's similar to the rubber band attack. It's actually interesting, this is a German company and they do a lot of research and development. So they actually buy stuff and buy automobiles and doors and stuff and hack their way into them. And of course, suppose you're physically pen testing, you could just try to find a different way in, like through the back door or through the roof. Sometimes you have these buildings where the roof only goes up this high and then as high as the wall. So if you go through the wall, you can go over the wall, through the ceiling, sorry. You can go over the wall to get to the other side. Or you can use physical violence. Now, in case you encounter RFID stuff, there will be a whole different talk about how to circumvent the RFID stuff. But it's getting easier and easier. Recently I bought on eBay one of these RFID cloning devices. This only works on low frequency RFID devices, but this is really neat. This is a self-contained device using a battery, so I can just read it, and now it doesn't. Right. So I read it, I get a green light, and I have a copy of the tag. Now this is really interesting, but I'm talking about physical pen testing, so that's all I'm going to say about it. So suppose we're through the front door, and next up is the building itself. Now you might encounter sliding doors. And again, if you stand in front of a sliding door, think like a hacker. How can I get access? Well, these doors will normally open automatically if you're coming from the inside, going out. So there's a sensor at the other side of the door, a sensor like this one, that will detect people going out, opening the door. So all I need to do is to trigger that sensor. So I went to a building that had sliding doors, I tried it out, and I found out this particular sensor detects if somebody is standing beneath it. It will detect if the person is standing right next to the door, because then it won't open. You need to be a little bit further away. But also it detects if you are, which direction you're going. So if you're on the inside, the door closes behind you and you walk away, you are in the correct spot, but the door won't open because you're walking away. But if you walk towards the door, it will detect this and will open the door. Because normally what you can do to open such doors is just take a piece of paper and shove it under the door or through the door, and it will trigger the sensor. But this sensor, it doesn't work because you're not approaching the sensor. So here I'm trying a piece of paper. This is what it looks from the inside. So you see it detects something, but not something approaching. Going out, nothing. Going in, it opens. Okay, so we're in. Next, we have the elevator that can bring us to specific floors, but only if we have the correct key. Now, here what's interesting is that many places, such as elevators, will have the same key. So I have a bunch of elevator keys that will work on most elevators. So this I took at another conference in Luxembourg. The key worked. I tried it here. Unfortunately, this hotel has their own key. So if you have a facility and you buy an elevator, you can ask them to give you a specific key for your place only. But in many cases you will just get the standard master key, because this is easier for people doing elevator maintenance. They just have the same bunch of keys to get access. So actually you will see master key systems being used in many more places than you would think of. So you have the slides in your downloads from T2. What's interesting is that if you have these pictures, you can actually build your own keys yourself. So here's a present from me to you. Okay, now we are at the 19-inch rack. So how to get in here? Now luckily 19-inch racks are not very well protected in most of the cases. And again, if you buy a 19-inch rack, it's the same as with elevators. You will probably get standard keys. So yeah, I got a bunch of 19-inch rack keys as well. That will open many 19-inch racks in a jiffy. But the locks are not really complicated, so there are different ways of easily getting access. And now to explain how this works, I need to do a short introduction of how lockpicking actually works. And for these I'm using pictures of pin tumbler locks. And I know you all want to know about how the Abloy works, but actually it's not that different. The systematics behind it is not very different from these locks. So I'm going to explain using these kinds of locks. You have pin stacks consisting of 2 pins on a spring. This is the plug that needs to rotate to operate the mechanism. And it won't rotate because these pins are stuck here at what is called the shear line. Now if you insert the correct key, all the pins will be pushed to exactly the correct position. The plug is free to turn, and you can use the key to actually turn the mechanism and open the lock. So there's not just one pin in the key, there are several pins. In most European locks you will find 5 pins, 5 pin stacks. So you see the key is cut to fit the length of the key pins, and it will align them all at the shear line, and the plug can rotate. So this is how our lock works. Now to open it, there are several techniques. One that is really efficient, if it works, is the pick gun. If you have 2 billiard balls and you smash a third one into it, what happens is that the energy is transferred to this ball, which moves along. And you can do the same with pin stacks. Suppose these are like the billiard balls. We have pin stacks with 2 pins. If I smash on the bottom pin, the energy is transferred to the top pin, which will then go up inside of the lock. So there will be, momentarily, a gap here, meaning the lock is open. Of course, because of the spring, the pin will immediately get back to the original position, so there's only a very tiny amount of time in which you can open the lock. But if you time it right, it works. So here we have a pick gun, and a pick gun is just a device with a needle that if I press it, it flips up. Now the hard part is, well, there are two hard things about the pick gun. First is you need to get to the pins correctly. You need to touch all 5 pins at the same time. So you mustn't hold it incorrectly. You must hold it so that all 5 pins are being touched at the same time. And the next hard thing is that you need to rotate the plug exactly after you've shot your pick gun. By the way, this time I didn't have so much trouble getting this through customs. Normally, if they see it in my luggage, it goes through the X-ray. It's always a lot of hassle, but this time it was not so bad. So I have here a lock. Well, I'll just cheat, and instead of having a tensioner, I will press on here for the turning motion. I insert it, and I shoot at the pins and apply tension at the correct moment, and this lock has opened. So actually, if the lock has no mechanisms to prevent this, this could be a very useful attack. And in fact, the elevators here that I didn't have the key for, it will open in just 2 clicks, and you win. So if you have a regular 19-inch rack, this will always work, right? So this is the one I use. You also have electronic versions, and if you're more of a do-it-yourself person, there's pages on the internet where you can read how to transform a electrical toothbrush into a pick gun. So the art of lockpicking and impressioning. First, impressioning. There's 2 main techniques for opening a lock without a key surreptitiously, which are lockpicking, which is using the James Bond tools to set all the pins in the correct position, and impressioning. And impressioning is actually making an impression of the correct key into a blank key. So you have a blank key, and you file away the key until it fits in the lock. And this is actually possible. And actually this is decoding, because if you pick a lock, it opens, but the next time you want to go in, you need to pick it again. If you use decoding, you now have the lock decoded, so you have the key, so you can enter again and again. How is this possible? Well, oh, by the way, the text is upside down. This is because I took these pictures from Deviant Ollam from Tool US, and in the US they have the locks upside down, although he thinks that we have the locks upside down, but this is why I flipped the pictures. You would think that if you do not insert a key and try to rotate the plug, that the lock will not turn, because it will be stuck here at the shear line at all 5 pins. But this is not actually true. It will not be stuck in all 5 positions. And the reason for this is that a lock is not mechanically perfect. And I bought a real cheap Chinese lock, and you can actually, and I drew a line on it, and you can actually see already with the naked eye that the pins are not perfectly in line. And because the pins are not perfectly aligned, or maybe there's some other mechanical defect, like the pins are not exactly the same width, this makes it possible. Makes it possible to do impressioning. How does it work? I buy a blank key. So this key does not, well, it fits the lock, but it doesn't operate the lock because it doesn't have the correct cuts yet. So all the pins are down too far. Now I turn the key. It doesn't work. But it does not, it's not the case that all 5 pins are blocking, because they are not in a straight line, or they're not all as thick as each other. So there will be one pin that will be the thickest or the furthest to this side. Anyway, there will be one pin that will keep the lock from turning. And this is actually the same fault that we use to make picking possible, but it also makes impressioning possible. Because what I do now is I wiggle the key, so I keep the turning force to keep this locked. Now I wiggle the key in the lock. What will happen? Well, these pins are free to move. Only this pin is not free to move. So if I wiggle the key, the tip of the pin will push a little bit into the key. And if I use a key that's not made out of steel, but out of some kind of other material, a softer material, I can actually see the markings on the key. So I move the key, and sometimes you're lucky and you might have 2 pins that are actually blocking in turn because you're wiggling the key. You take out the key and you look very closely using a magnifier to see where you got markings. And they're really tiny, and this is the hard part of impressioning, learning how to recognize those markings. You take a file and you file away at this position and this position. How much? A little bit, not too much, because if you file away too much, the lock will never open. If you're really good at lockpicking, you know, you've learned how many strokes with your file you can make to be it okay. And you repeat the process. So now we have a key in which these pins are a bit higher up, but you see they're still not in the correct position. So if I apply the turning force and start wiggling, they will still bind and give new markings on the place that I've just filed away a little bit. So I repeat the process. I see the markings, I file away a little bit of material here, a little bit there, and here's a picture I made of an actual key that I have been impressioning, and here you can see the marking. And so this is the hard part, to understand what you're seeing. And you see the marks that the pins make when I insert the key or take it out. And these markings are really hard to spot. You really need to put the key in different lighting and move it about a little bit so you can see either a lighter or darker spot. So we saw new spots, we file away, and here's the good thing: when the pin is in the correct position, if I now wiggle the key, it won't mark here because this now has a little bit of room to play. So it will stop marking in my key. So I know I filed it away to the correct position. And I repeat the process. So in this case I have a new marking here where I file. This one does no longer mark. And maybe I have a new marking. I file away and repeat the process until I'm done. And in fact, if you really practice this a lot, it's a really good way of opening locks.
How much time does it take ballpark?
How much time does it take? If we have competitions, people do it within 3 to 5 minutes. But in a real world scenario, it might probably take 20 minutes. I know the previous president of Tool, he now makes a living out of this. And if he needs to open a lock for somebody, well, if the pig gun works in 3 seconds, okay, you use that. But if it doesn't work, you don't start lockpicking, because that also might take 20, 30 minutes. No, he immediately starts doing this, because he knows in 20 minutes it'll be done. And all you need is blank keys, maybe a handle to put on the key so you can apply more force, a good file, a vise, and what's it called? Magnifier. Thank you. And you can use this for different locks as well. So here I have a lips lock which has dimples. Works the same way. The mechanism is the same. And it doesn't really matter how I'm filing, as long as when I insert the key, the pins are end up at the correct position. So I don't need to drill neat little holes. I can just file away to make it fit. Now, but how about this one? Abloy Classic. So this works differently. It doesn't work with pin stacks on springs. It has a different mechanism. It uses discs. Right, so inside of the lock there are several discs, and they can rotate. And the discs have a notch, and if they're all aligned, the notches are aligned, and there is this piece of metal, a metal bar, that can fall into those notches, allowing the lock to turn. And what the key does is, it will turn the discs a certain amount of degrees depending on the angle of the cut in the key. So these are the discs. So you see they have the angle of the notch compared to where the key is different for different elements. And what's also interesting is that there is no springs. So you use the key to move the elements inside of the lock. Now, can this be impressioned? Well, actually, we have the same principles here. We have, but instead of pins that need to be in the correct position, we have discs that need to be turned into the correct position. But again, there will be mechanical imperfections. So not all the discs will be perfectly the same size. So one disc might be a little bit bigger. So what happens if I try to open the lock, if I apply tension, the bar wants to fall into the notches. If the discs are not in the correct position, the bar will fall somewhere where it can't go any further. But depending on whether this is the largest disc or a bit of a thinner disc, it might go just a tiny little bit further. And we can abuse this. So what I've done is I bought some blank keys, which was pretty hard actually to find blank keys. And I made some markings where the cuts normally are. Here you see it again. And I filed away some material using a Dremel machine just to make the surface of contact a little bit less. So to not spread the force over a large surface but over a small surface, so the markings will be better to see. So there's the key that I made. And what you can do, again, is you insert it just like normal impressioning. You insert the key inside of the lock. You apply turning force until it blocks. Actually, this part of the lock, of the key, is the part that does the turning. In the end of the lock is the mechanism for actually operating the lock. So what I do is I turn, I wiggle, take it out and see if there are any markings on these pins. And I used black ink to make it a little bit more easy to see. And again, I use a magnifier glass. I have to say this was really, really difficult. So I cut away a little bit, and you repeat the process by cutting, turning, cutting, turning, until you end up with something like this. And here you see the original key and the key that I made. I have to say I did have to cheat a little bit to see if I wasn't going too far on the pins, because I only had 3 blank keys, and it would have taken me more than 3 blank keys probably for the first time to get something working. But I know of people who have actually done this successfully without any cheating at all. So it can be done, but it's really difficult. Impressioning is already difficult, but impressioning in Abloy even more so. These are pictures from Barry, the previous president of Tool. He did some experiments with it. This is a decoder tool. So you insert the Abloy classic key and it will tell you the code of the key, the angle of the cuts. So this is the original key. So you see the number of the key. By using impressioning, he made a copy of the key and put it in the same machine. And you see it's not really the same number. So this means that there is actually a bit of tolerance inside of the position of the discs.
Does it work on the lock?
Does it work on the lock? This works on the lock, yeah. Lockpicking. So, I told you how a lock works, a pin tumbler lock. So how does lock picking work? Well, I already also told you that if you apply pressure turning force on the plug, it will not bind at all 5 pins, but only at 1 pin, the pin that is the thickest or furthest to the side. And this you can also use for lock picking. So what you do is you feel the pins using your pick tool. If you only feel spring tension, you know this is not the pin that is blocking. If pushing takes more effort, this pin is scraping against the plug, you know, this is the pin that is currently blocking, I need to push it to the correct position. And now the great thing about lockpicking is that you can keep it in the correct position because the lock will automatically do this. If you find the pin that is blocking and you push it down to the correct position, the plug will rotate ever so slightly. It won't open because you have 4 more pins that are stuck, but it will turn just enough for the pin to keep there in the correct position. So this is great. This means we can sequentially pick a lock. You can find the pin that is blocking, put it in the correct position, and as long as you keep the tension on the plug, it will stay put. And you can find the next one, the next one, the next one, until the lock is open. So this is actually how you pick a lock. I'm going over this pretty fast. that you feel the different pins. If you feel only the spring, you know, okay, this is not the pin I need to pick. If you find that it has more tension, you push it to the correct position and it will stay put. You go and find the next one, and so forth. Until the lock opens. Well, this is actually quite difficult. You need a lot of training to be able to do this with almost any lock. But if you are able to do so, you can open 99% of the standard European locks. So not the Abloy, but the other locks. And the same mechanism actually also works for tubular locks. So suppose you're doing your physical pen test and you need to take away the laptop of the CEO that's hooked up to one of those Kensington locks. So how to open those? Well, you can use force, of course, but that would break the laptop. But there are different ways to do so. So in the Kensington locks, you also have the pin tumbler system. So pins with springs. The only difference is that they're not in one row, but they're circular. Actually, this is good because it means that you can actually see all the pins inside of the lock and you have easy access to all the pins. And you can pick them as you would do any other lock. You push them down and you feel which pin has the most friction, push it down to the correct position, go to the next one, the next one, the next one, until you've got them all and the lock will open. The only hard part about these locks is to apply the turning force. Right, so these locks, you need to turn the inner part, and this is harder than with a regular lock. But you can open them by hand, picking the individual pins, no problem. Be careful because if you want to try this on your own Kensington, there's the old Kensingtons and there's the new ones. The new ones you can recognize because they have a metal pin at the tip. What they have done is they have put in an extra hole that is filled by this tip. So if you use the key and you rotate the key, then the hole underneath here will be completely filled with this tip. But if you're picking, you don't have this tip. So this hole is empty. And when you turn the lock, the empty hole gets moved to a position where we have this pin. And it will pop into the hole. And it will be blocked. So if you open a Kensington using lockpicking techniques, and it's one of the newer ones, then when you turn it 1/8 of a rotation, this pin will pop in and it will be blocked. You can push it back using lockpicking techniques, but it's really pretty annoying. So please be careful not to actually practice on Kensington locks that are on your own computer. I have to quickly see what the next slide is going to be. Oh, yeah. So this is picking. You can also do impressioning on these kinds of locks, and actually it works pretty well. So what you need to do is you have a key that is going too deep in all positions, right? This is with the normal impressioning. You have a key that is full, and then you need to file away pieces. Well, in this case you don't file away. You use a key, a makeup key, which is this, which has metal sliders that can slide back and forth. And if you insert it in the key and you wiggle a little bit, this means that the pins that you've pushed down too far will be stuck and will be pushing back. And they will be pushing back those rods until they come at the correct position. And then they will be free and they will not push when I'm wiggling. So this is a system where I can do impressioning without actually having to file. It's like self-impressioning. I insert it in the lock, I wiggle, I increase the pressure while keeping on wiggling, and this will form to be the correct key. So I insert it, I wiggle, increase the pressure, and it already opened. Now this you can also use for the Kensington. So I used it on this lock, this Kensington, it does work. But again, because this fails the little tip here, it will open, but it will relock when it's turned 1/8 of a revolution. But of course, if you build a tip like this on this tool, it will work. So that's impressioning. Actually, the old Kensington locks you can impression with any material that has the right softness. It needs to be a little bit soft so the pins can push into it. And one of the things people have been using are big pens made of rubber, and also the carton that you will find inside of a toilet paper roll, as you can see here. So this is just a bit of carton. You wiggle. More power. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. It opens. Okay, but to get back to the Abloy locks. I have to say that I haven't been really looking into these locks. I still think the ProTech is one of the hardest locks to open. But I focused on the oldest one, the classic. So can we decode it or pick it? Well, there are some other locks that are similar, like Abus has a lock. It also works with discs. It has the same principle, so it has discs with a notch in it. There is a metal bar that needs to fall in, and then it will open. And for this you actually have tools that you can buy. So this tool has a tip that is for the actual operation of the lock, the turning of the lock. And you see here a little flat metal piece that you can pull back and forth using this knob. It actually has markings so you know where this thing is inside of the lock. You can pull it back and forth to operate on the different discs. And you can turn it, of course, to turn each individual disc. And lockpicking, such an Abus, is the same as lockpicking a regular lock. There's one disc that will be a little bit bigger than the rest, mechanical imperfections. I feel which one has most friction, because the bar is on top of it. And if I have the one that has the most friction, I turn the disc until the gap is where the bar is. It will fall in a little bit. I can feel this. And then I go to the next disc, the next biggest disc, the one that has friction. Move that in the correct position. And once I'm done with all the discs, it should be open. Now the Abus is doable, you can buy tools, but how about the Abloy Classic? Well, I found this on the internet. And this is the H&H, that's a Hong Kong company. Oh no, this is the Abus opener. So here you can see the German lock. Right, so you can turn each individual disc, and you need to align them so that the holes, the notches, are lined up so the bar can fall in. Now this is not really real life, this picture, because what you see is that they are moving the discs one by one sequentially from back to front. And this is not how it works in reality, because in reality it's not that the discs get bigger from back to front, it's random. So you need to be able to rotate the discs in a random order. Just with lockpicking you need to find out which pin is the next to set. But for this lock it's not really a problem, because you can just go back and forth to find the correct disc. Now here's why Abloy is more difficult. So Abloy works in the same way. We have discs with a notch in which a metal bar needs to fall. And you can also see here that there are half depth notches, false notches. And these are made just to make lockpicking more difficult, or impressioning. And they are already in the oldest classic series. So if you turn the disc and this notch is on top, it might feel like you have put the disc in the correct position, while in fact you have not. So this is just to frustrate decoding and lockpicking. Now there have been people who have been working on making a tool. So this you can find on the internet, and this is from 1992, an idea of a picking tool. And actually there are not many people actively working on such tools. I did find one company, this is the same Hong Kong company, that has an Abloy tool. So this is their movie. So it works the same as the Abus tool. So you can turn the disc individually. Actually, I have the tool here.
One on sale if you want.
Oh, he has one on sale. I have one on sale as well. This tool will cost you about 90 euros. And here's what the experts have to say about it. So, the rumor I have heard is that the developer who built this tool said to their boss in Hong Kong, this tool will never work, and the boss said, well, never mind, just sell it anyway. And they sell it. It's about 90 euros, but it's a waste of money because it doesn't work at all. The problem being that there's only so much space inside of the Abloy Classic lock. The discs can rotate 90 degrees, and there's only a little space where you can keep the tools, no matter how the discs are turned. And this tool occupies a space in the lock that can also be occupied by the discs. So this means that the only way I can use this tool is by going from the back to the front and setting each disc in the correct position, and then it opens. So if I know the correct code, I could use this tool to open the lock and set the correct code. But you cannot use it for lockpicking because I cannot get back to the end once I've turned the disc, because the disc will then be in the way of getting my tool in. So this is a terrible tool. So what do we do now? So this is the not working tool. And this is the tip. The idea is good. You have the end tip that moves the lock, and this can go back and forth to turn the individual discs, but there's too much metal and it's in the way. What else can we do? Well, there have been amateur lockpickers thinking about ways to build a tool. And this is one person who claims he has been successful. I don't know if it's true, but it should be possible. What he has made is he used a real classic key, cut away some material, and this is actually a part where you can have material. This is not in the way of the discs. And he uses a separate pick so you can turn each individual disc. But I was in contact, I know two people who built tools to open an Abloy. One is from Finland, Jaakko Fagerlund, and one is in England, Matt Smith. And Matt had some tools lying around that he was willing to sell to me. Normally this tool will cost you about 300 euros. And this actually works. So again, you have a knob that will operate the thing to rotate the individual discs. You have a measurement so you know which disc you're rotating. And you can also see how far you're rotating. So you're not just opening the lock, you're actually decoding the lock. If you look at the markings, you know which position all the discs are. And if you write it down, you can make a new key. It has several parts that you can screw on top, because not every Abloy is the same. So the distance from the end of the lock to where the disc pack starts differs from lock to lock. Actually, I have two of these handbag locks, and they already differ. So you can screw on another top so it has the correct depth. And I did a lot of work, but eventually, yes, I was able to open an Abloy. It's really hard. Also because of the false notches. So what happens is that you try to find the correct disc, turn it in the correct position, but it might be a false notch. Now I've spoken with Matt, and he says he can actually feel the difference between a false notch and a real notch. I need more training for that. So I do a little bit of brute forcing. You have a few notches, and I try them in different positions until it opens. Well, here's the tool. So I am going to try to do a live Abloy opening on stage. First I have to dance for the demo gods. So I insert the tool, apply tension, and here I can move back and forth to the individual discs and turn them 90 degrees. In this lock, the first disc is fixed. Some Abloy Classics, the first disc is stuck. It's also interesting because it's not the case in the other Abloy I have, so they are actually quite different. So I move to the next disc, and I feel, yeah, it's stuck. Next one, yeah, it's stuck again. So maybe they're in the correct position.
No pressure.
No pressure. Yeah, this is also stuck somewhere. There's also, and the good thing is, I know that the last discs are always a 5. They go all the way. Well, it hasn't opened, so I must be in a false notch somewhere. So I go back, which I can with this tool, and try a different position. Ah, wow, it works live on stage. So yes, it can be done. That's a good thing. I don't need my backup video that I made. No, I wasn't really too sure because this is still quite hard. It's really amazing to see how good these locks still are after so many years. Now, what about the newer Abloy locks? So you've got the I don't know exactly the name. This is, I believe, the Extra. Exact? Exec. So they have some new features, new kind of discs. They also changed the key so that sometimes one side of the key is rotating the disc, sometimes the other side of the key. They have an extra mechanism to hold the key inside of the lock when you're rotating. It has a completely different keyway, so anyway I would need a new tool to facilitate a new keyway. And it has many more discs, so these go up to 11 or 13 discs. So I don't know about people who have actually picked these kinds of locks, but in theory it will be possible. And the ProTech is even worse. But on the internet I did see a movie about a guy who built who built an Abloy decoder. So, but what's interesting is this is all really hush-hush. There are not many people in the world into opening Abloy classics, so you won't find much information about that. But there are really not many people into opening Abloy ProTechs, and it would be a huge thing if you can build a tool that reliably opens an Abloy ProTech. And if you build such a tool, then you will probably sell it to governments and not put random YouTube videos on the internet. This guy says he has made one, and on the video he shows the working of the tool, but he's very careful not to show the actual tool, so you don't know what's really going on. And I've been in some discussions with people about the feasibility of this, and the general idea is that this could be possible. But I've never seen it in the wild. So this is not actually opening, this is really decoding. So he uses a tool to manipulate a certain disk, feel how far it needs to go, and he put a laser pointer on top, and he has markings here for the different amounts of rotation. And as you can see, in a standard Abloy, the classic, you only have 6 positions, but here you have many more. And you can see which disk has to be rotated how much. And when you're completely done with the lock, then you can take a key cutting machine, enter the code, cut the key, and that should fit the lock. And that's it. So maybe you have some questions. By the way, if you want to know more, see the tool in action, you can always, I have the tools with me all day, so if you during lunch or breaks, you want to see some stuff, you're welcome to. Yes?
Question, why 99% of doors still use locks which can be picked?
Why do most people still use pickable locks? People don't know, or people don't care. It's really funny that in Finland everybody has good locks, the Abloy, and I've had some discussions about that, but I think the reason is that because it's a Finnish company and everybody has Abloy locks, people are a bit reluctant to use something else because it's weird. So you're quite safe. If I look at the Netherlands, people just they're cheapskates, so they want to spend 10 euros on a lock and not 80 euros, so they buy a cheap lock. And as long as it works, it works. But in the end, if you talk about safety, you need to look at the whole picture, right? So if I have an Abloy ProTech on my door, but I'm able to use the mail slot to open the door from the inside, what uses the Abloy ProTech? Make sure you're better protected than your neighbor, that's the main thing. Yes?
How do you deal with safety pins in tumbler locks?
How do you deal with safety pins and tumbler locks? Well, I didn't have time to go into that, but you can actually feel where they are and you can push them to the correct position. If you want, I can give you a demonstration later on. Yeah, it makes it harder, but not impossible.
Could you duplicate the Abloy keys, like if you decoded them, or you could get in your hands the original key for any other than the classic ones?
Can I duplicate a key other than the classic one? Yeah, for the classic one it would be pretty easy, because if I have a classic key, I can just, by looking at it with my naked eye, I can figure out what the code is and I can make a copy. But of course for the exec or the protec, it's a whole different story. There are so many disks and many more different angles that will be really hard. But using a tool like the blue tool you saw before, such a tool could be used to quickly figure out the code of the key.
But if like you have the plastic thing for like the protec that they have in the locksmith store, could you then, without having Abloy blanks, create
So the question is, if I have the correct code but I don't have a blank key or a machine, could I make the key? For the classic, I think yes. The tolerances are such that I can just file away and it will fit. But for protec, I think it will be. That's a 3D printed key?
But it's a classic.
Yeah, it's a classic. But for the protec, I think the tolerances are such that, and there are so many disks and they are so slim. I think it would be quite a challenge to build a key. So I think that would be quite safe.
What about even for exec? Like, is it safe to post my home keys on the internet? Or?
Is it safe to post your home keys? No, it's never safe to post your home keys on the internet. No, because if you can read the code and you do have a machine, it's probably easy to just type in the code and cut the key from an original machine.
Just a little question about impression. If you are wiggling, do you risk wearing out the pins?
If you wiggle, do you risk wearing out the pins? Well, there will be a little bit of wear on the pins, but not so much that the lock won't operate or something will break. You will get marks that if you open the lock later and do some forensic analysis, you can see that it has been impressioned. But it's not that much wear that it will not function anymore. Yes?
How easy will it be for forensics to determine if there is no wear and tear or if it's from impression?
I didn't hear the first part.
How easy will it be for forensics to determine if it's from normal wear and tear or if it's from impression?
Yeah, it's quite easy to do forensic investigation to see what has happened. It used to be pretty hard because we didn't have data about what it should look like, but there's this police guy in Berlin. He's done a lot of research and he made a lot of pictures. So now we know what it looks like when what has happened. So it's not that hard. Do we have time for another question?
What lock do you use yourself at home?
What lock do I use? I get that question a lot of times. Actually, it doesn't really matter. It's the whole package. So I have a lock that is a bit better than what my neighbors have, and also it doesn't stick out of the door. That's really important. If your lock sticks out, you can just break it out of the door, and you're in. So I have a regular lock. Yeah. Also for the Abloy, one of the ways to get in, if you have like an Abloy like this, you can take a screw that just fits the entry and then smash on it, and the whole innard of the lock will pop out, and you also get in. But that's something that the protec also protects about.
Drill out the faceplate.
Drill out the faceplate, yeah. Get the first disc and then get it out from the front, yeah.